Welcome back, friends. I'm Lillian and this is still Insta School. Today we'll continue in the consideration of our Waec past question for the year 2011 on the subject biology. I would like you to follow us on our social media pages at instaschool_edu on Instagram and on Facebook, and on Twitter at instaschool_live. Now let's move on to our questions. Our question 31 says, which of the following groups of substances are not 6-carbon compounds? Now, when we look at our option, we have glucose, lactose, cellulose, and pyruvate. Now let's analyze them one after the other. Glucose is simple sugar, and it is made up of 6 carbon atoms, 12 hydrogen atoms, and 6 oxygen atoms. So it has the formula of C6H12O6. Now what about lactose? Lactose is a disaccharide sugar. Why we say it's disaccharide? Because it is made up of 2 monosaccharides, that is glucose and galactose. These 2 monosaccharides are linked together to form a disaccharide known as lactose. So the chemical formula for lactose is C12H22 and O11, that is 12 carbon, 22 hydrogen, and 11 oxygen. Now what is cellulose? Cellulose is a polysaccharide. It is made up of different units of glucose monosaccharide. That is, cellulose is made up of different glucose. Now what of pyruvate? Pyruvate is the product of glycolysis, and it has a formula of C3H4O3. That is 3 carbon atom, 4 hydrogen atom, and 3 oxygen atom. Now, if we look at all our options, we see that cellulose and pyruvate are the ones that do not have 6 carbon atom. Therefore, our answer is our option D. Pyruvate and cellulose are substances that are not 6 carbon compounds. Question 32. A purple color was obtained when sodium hydroxide solution and a drop of copper sulfate solution were added to a food substance. The food substance is likely to be A. Now this is an example of food test. And sodium hydroxide with the chemical formula NaOH and copper sulfate CuSO4 is the component of a solution known as the biuret solution. And this solution turns purple to show the presence of protein in a food. So we can simply say our answer is option C, because this food substance is definitely a protein, because it becomes purple on the addition of biuret solution, which is a combination of sodium hydroxide and copper sulfate. Moving on to our question 33. Which of the following enzyme is active in the duodenum? Now when we talk about the duodenum, we're talking about the first part of our small intestine. Now when we look at all these enzymes, where do we find them? The pepsin can be found in the stomach, and it helps to break down protein. So that one is out of our option. Now also about the renin or the amylase. The amylase is an enzyme that is formed, that is present in the mouth, and it functions in breaking down carbohydrates. Now, trypsin. Trypsin can be found in the duodenum. Trypsin alongside elastase and chymotrypsin are present in the duodenum. And this digestive enzyme helps to further break down protein into smaller units known as amino acids. Usually, they simply continue from where the stomach stops in breaking down protein. So our answer is option C, trypsin. Question 34. The following organisms are producers except when we talk about producers, in an ecosystem, the producers are the organisms that has the ability to synthesize inorganic matters. What I mean is, producers have the ability to transform sunlight alongside other matters into food. This food can sustain them, and they also serve as food to other members of the ecosystem, that is, the consumers. Usually, in an ecosystem, the green plants are the producers, but we can also have the algae, the bacteria, and the phytoplankton as the producers. These producers are also known as the autotroph. So when we look at our option, we have the hibiscus, spirogyra, and cactus. The hibiscus and cactus are plants. The hibiscus is a flower, while cactus is a plant. And we already said that green plants perform the function of producers in most ecosystems. Now, what about spirogyra? Spirogyra is an organism, a microscopic organism that has the ability to photosynthesize in order to produce its own food. But when we look at the mushroom usually grow on dead and decaying plants. So they cannot photosynthesize, and they are usually referred to as saprophytes because they grow and they feed on dead and decaying plants. So our answer is our option B. Moving on to our next question, question 35. Which of the following structures produces the greatest variety of digestive enzymes? As I have said earlier, digestive enzymes help to break down food into simpler matters, into simpler molecules. In the salivary gland, we find the amylase. Amylase helps to break down starch. In the stomach, we find the pepsin that helps to break down protein. Now, what of the colon or the long intestine? The colon does not release any digestive enzyme, but it also plays a role in breaking down nutrients. Now, the pancreas, which is the last of our option. The pancreas is located behind the stomach. And in the pancreas, we find enzymes such as the trypsin, the chymotrypsin, and the lipase. So we see that the pancreas has or produces the greatest variety of digestive enzymes. Question 36. The following are abiotic components of an ecosystem except. Now, what are the abiotic factors or components of an ecosystem? These are simply the non-living components of our ecosystem. And when we talk about the non-living components, we're talking about sunlight, temperature, water, soil, and even the air we breathe in and out, that is oxygen and carbon dioxide. So when we take a look at our option, which of these is the odd one out? Bacteria. Bacteria is a living thing, and it makes up the biotic factor of an ecosystem. So our answer is therefore option C. Bacteria is not among the abiotic components of an ecosystem. Question 37. Use the information on capture-recapture method to calculate the total number of organisms in a habitat. And we've been given parameters. We have the first capture to be 200, second capture to be 120, and then the number of organisms with mark in second capture to be 40. So we are asked to calculate the total number of organisms. Now, if we want to calculate the total number of organisms, we say n, capital N, is equal to small n multiplied by capital K divided by small k. Now, the capital N refers to the total number of organisms, while the small n refers to the animals that are captured on the first visit. The capital K represents the number of animals that are captured on the second visit. And lastly, the small letter k represents the number of animals marked. Now let us calculate. When we say the number of animals captured on the first visit, we are talking about 200. Now what of K, capital K, number of animals captured on the second visit? That's 120. So when we multiply these two, we get 24,000. Then we divide it by small k, that is, number of animals that are marked, which is 40. And this gives us 600. That means our answer is the option C, 600. That's the total number of organisms. Moving on to our question 38. Ecological investigation in a habitat includes the following procedures except dash. Now, ecological investigation. This means when scientists examine the interaction among species in a habitat. They do this considering both the biotic and the abiotic factor that affect these organisms. They also consider the niche, the ecological niche of each of these organisms. So when we take a look at our option, the odd one out is the option C. And why do we say so? Because the genetic makeup of every individual organism is determined by their genes, that is, the transmitted genes from the parents to the offspring. Now we move on to question 39. Which of the following substances, when lost from the body of mammal, will not be returned to the ecosystem? Now from our option, we see a variety of products from the body of mammal. We sweat, not so. We also pass out urea through our urine, and then we breathe out carbon dioxide. But what about heat energy? Heat energy is usually gotten from sunlight. And since this energy is converted to other forms of energy, it is usually passed from the producers in an ecosystem to the consumers up to the top, that is, in a food chain or in a food web. But this heat energy does not remain in the ecosystem because it is passed from organisms to organism. So our answer is heat energy, which is our option C. Now the question 40. The rate of decomposition of organisms is faster in the tropical rainforest than in other biomes because, now when we talk of the rate of decomposition of organisms, when it is high, that is, we are referring to the action of bacteria and fungi to break down dead plants and animals. Now, it is usually high in the tropical rainforest, because of the presence of the moist environment. The tropical rainforest is characterized by being humid and wet, and this is because it gets enough amounts of rainfall all year long. So when we take a look at our option, the option C describes our answer. Abundance of water in the tropical rainforest is responsible for the rate of decomposition of organisms being faster in that biome. Moving on to our question 41. A xerophyte conserves water by possession of the following features except. Now when we talk about a xerophyte plant refers to a plant that is adapted to living in dry areas, that is, areas that receives little amounts of water. For example, we can find xerophytes in the desert, like the cactus plant. Now, these xerophytes need to take in enough water that can sustain them over a long period of time. But more importantly, they need to minimize their water loss, that is, the rate at which they lose water. They also need to be able to store their water efficiently. And how do they do this? Well, they possess thick cuticle. They also have a sunken stomata, that is, a reduced stomata on their leaf. Another feature is smaller leaves and sometimes even fewer branches. All these help them to reduce water loss by transpiration. Another feature they have is fleshy stem. This fleshy stem helps them to store more water. So when we take a look at our option, the xerophytes have thick cuticle, sunken stomata, and fleshy stem. But the only thing among our option which is wrong is broadleaf. In contrast, the xerophytes usually have smaller leaf, as this will help them to minimize the rate at which they lost water. Question 42. The falling off of leaves of deciduous trees is helpful to the plant because it's dash. Now, deciduous trees are trees that shed their leaves for some part of the year. Now, when we talk of deciduous tree, we are talking about the oak tree and the maple tree. These trees are usually found in the temperate region, that is, cooler region. So they shed their leaf during winter when there is less sunlight. And why they do this is in order to conserve water and energy. This will help them to survive unfavorable weather conditions like the winter. The rate of transmission, so when we look at our option, we have option A as the answer, because deciduous trees shed off their leaf in order to reduce the rate of transpiration. And the rate of transpiration simply means the rate at which the plant loses water. And this is usually done through the stomata present on their leaf. Now our question 43. A sample of wet garden soil of known weight was heated to constant weight. The loss of weight is due to loss of dash. Now when we talk about soil, the soil is composed of organic matters. This organic matter is made up of dead plants and animals. It is also composed of water, minerals, and microorganisms. So if a soil upon heating loses its weight, this can be due to the loss of some of these components, like the organic matters that are present in it, and also loss of water. So when we look at our option, we can say that the best answer is option C, because alongside the loss of organic matter, it also loses water as it is being heated. Now question 44. Assuming that the period of stable population size is followed by a period when natality rates increases by 10% and immigration rate increases by 20% of population size, the population size will dash. Now when we talk about natality rate, this is the rate at which individuals are being added to the population due to reproduction, that is, natality rate is equal to birth rate. This will definitely cause an increase in the population size. Now, the other factor we have is immigration. And immigration is one factor that causes a rise or an increase in the population size because individuals are moving into a new location. So when we combine these two factors, natality and immigration, this will lead to an increase in the number of individuals in a particular region. That is, it will lead to an increase in the population size. That's our option C. The population size will begin to increase. Moving on to our question 45. Which of the following methods does not make water fit for drinking? Now, how can we make our water fit for drinking? We can use some methods such as boiling. We can also treat the water with chlorine. We can use water filter or even alum. When alum is added to the water, it can make it clean because it helps to coagulate particles that are present in the water. Now, the only odd option out of this option is distillation. And why do we say so? This is because distillation is a process that involves the conversion of liquid into vapor. And when we talk of distillation, we talk about steam that is coming out of a kettle of boiling water or a pot of boiling water. That is distillation. So that is not a way of purifying water, not so. So answer is C, distillation. Question 46. Vaccination results in dash. Now we have some diseases like smallpox, polio, and tetanus. These diseases can be prevented, and in many parts of the world, they have even been eliminated because of vaccination. When we talk about vaccination, vaccination helps the body to create antibodies. This is usually done in the immune system. And these antibodies protect us from diseases. Now we have different vaccines for different diseases. That's why we have the chickenpox vaccine, the measles vaccine. The chickenpox vaccine protects against chickenpox, while the measles vaccine protects against measles. And usually, these vaccines are administered to children after they have been born. So, the vaccination results in the production of antibodies that helps to destroy toxins in the body. Our question 47. Leguminous crops are incorporated into crop rotation in order to dash. Now when we talk about leguminous crops like beans, soya bean, and pea, these leguminous crops are usually in a symbiotic relationship with rhizobium. And this rhizobium helps to fix nitrogen in the roots of these leguminous crops. So these leguminous plants are used in crop rotation, and this is because they can help to fix the nitrogen present in the air. And this will also help a farmer because it will reduce the cost of buying nitrogenous fertilizer for use on the farm. So our answer is option B, because leguminous crops promote nitrogen fixation due to the symbiotic association with rhizobium. Now our question 48. Which of the following practices improves crop yield in a clay soil? Now, what can we add to a clay soil that improves the crop yield? When we add lime to clay, it can help to raise the soil pH, which will make the soil more alkaline, and then they start to stick close to each other so that it has the ability to grow plant crop. Another thing we can add to clay soil is humus. Now, what is humus? Humus is a composition of leaves and other plant materials, which is done by microorganisms. It is important in clay soil, that is, the addition of humus is important to clay soil because it does not allow those small particles that are found in the soil to stick too tightly to each other. So lime and humus are important to improve the crop yield in a clay soil. Our question 49. Which of the following activities promote forest conservation? Now, when we talk about forest conservation, that's protecting or conserving our forests for future purposes. Let's take a look at our option. What is lumbering? Lumbering is the felling of trees that are of economic importance. And usually, trees are lumbered to be used for different purposes, like for firewood, for cooking, and even for paper to be used in industries that produces books. Now, all of these do not conserve the forest. Rather, they lead to a decrease in the trees in the forest because these trees are constantly felled. Now, the only odd one out of our option, that is, the only activity that promotes forest conservation, is afforestation. And when we talk of afforestation, this is the process of establishing new forests, especially on a land that was not previously a forest. Now, this is one sure way of conserving our forests and preventing soil erosion. Now, let's move on to question 50. Which of the following statements is not true about continuous variation? Continuous variation, such as the height of humans and the weight of humans and animals, is controlled by many genes. So let's look at our option. Option D is very wrong because it is not controlled by one or two pairs of genes. When we talk of discontinuous variation can be controlled by only one gene or two pairs of genes. But when we talk of continuous variation, it is controlled by several genes. Moving on to our question 51. Acquired characters are dash. Acquired characters are those traits that an organism is not born with. That is, someone is not born with a particular trait, but he gets it from the environment or due to some events in his life. When we talk about acquired characters or traits, we talk about broken bone, probably due to an accident. We can also talk about the effect of surgery, that is, the after effect of surgery on an individual. These traits or these characters are not gotten from parents. We see that these characters are not gotten from one's parents. Now, acquired character is opposite to inherited characters. Inherited characters are transferred from parents to offspring. So when we look at our question, acquired characters are caused by the environment. And this is because they are neither passed from parents to offspring, neither are they caused by mutation. When we talk of mutation of the gene is when there is a change in one or more of the gene. This can be gotten from the parent sometimes, and it leads to some genetic disorder like Down syndrome, color blindness, and hemophilia. Moving on to our question 52. Differences in characteristics observed between individuals of the same species is known as dash. Differences in the organisms of the same species is known as variation. It can either be genotypic variation or phenotypic variation. When we talk of genotypic variation, we are talking about the differences in the genetic makeup of an individual. When we talk of phenotypic variation, this is the differences in the appearance of an individual. So our answer is variation. Variation explains the difference in characteristics between individuals of the same species. Now we move on to question 53. Which of the following statements best describes protein synthesis? Now, protein synthesis in the body refers to the process of creating new protein molecules within the cells. This usually happens in the ribosomes. And there are two stages of protein synthesis: the transcription and the translation. Now, the mRNA are also known as the messenger RNA. And these mRNA carry instructions on how to produce specific protein. And where does it take this instruction from? From the DNA. It carries it to the site of production, which is the ribosome. Now, in the ribosome, chains of amino acids come together to form protein molecules. Now, when we look at our options, our option A is the most correct because the DNA is directly involved in this process. Question 54. If a person has 2 alleles of the sickle cell anemia gene, the person dash. Now, anemia is a condition that affects a person because the person has a lower than normal red blood cells, that is hemoglobin concentration in the blood. This is usually due to a low level of iron in the person's body. So a person that has sickle cell anemia must have inherited 1 copy of allele from his mother and 1 copy of allele from his father. And this simply means that this person's parents are both carriers of the disease. So when we go back to our question, the person with a sickle cell anemia gene, with 2 alleles of this sickle cell anemia gene, has the disease of anemia. Question 55. What is the probability of a man of blood group AB married to a woman of blood group O producing a child of blood group O? Now, the union between this man with the blood group AB and the woman with blood group O will produce offspring that have blood group A and blood group AB. Sorry, blood group A and blood group B. And why do we say so? This is because blood group A and blood group B are dominant to blood group O. And in this case, the man's blood group A is dominant to the woman's blood group O. But in a case where the both parents carry a blood group O, that is, the mother and the father both have a blood group O in their blood group, their child can be of blood group O. What I mean is, either the father and the mother are blood group OO, or the father and the mother are blood group AO, or the father or the mother are blood group BO. That is, they must carry the O blood group in their blood type. So the answer is 0%. There is no chance that they'll bring to life a child with blood group O. Question 56. A man with blood group allele A is married to a woman with blood group allele A allele O. The blood group of their son is likely to be dash. While in codominance, the allele IA and IB are dominant over allele IO. So an offspring that has the allele IO can only be produced if both the parents are heterozygous for the allele O. For instance, each of the parents are either IAIO and IAIO in order for this offspring to have the blood group O. So in this question, their son is likely to be of blood group A, and this is because only one of the parents, the mother, has the blood group O. Moving on to question 57. Natural selection is a consequence of dash. Natural selection is the process that results in organisms adapting to their environment, usually due to the differences in their pattern of survival, in the rate of development, so that only the organisms that have heritable traits are allowed to survive. These organisms are able to adapt more than individuals that lack such traits, and this is why the natural selection is also called survival of the fittest, because only the fittest organism, that is, organisms with traits that enables them to survive. So natural selection is a consequence of adverse conditions. Question 58. Which of the following components of Lamarck's theory of evolution is considered faulty? Now, Jean-Baptiste Lamarck is a scientist that worked on the theory of evolution. And his theory is based on two principles. One of the principles is that new species evolve from previous species. The second principle is that acquired traits are inherited by offspring. But there are limitations to these principles. And one of the limitations is that acquired traits, that is, traits that we do not get from birth, that is, traits that we get from external influences or activities, are not inherited, that is, parents cannot pass acquired traits to their offspring. This is because acquired traits do not produce a change in the DNA. Now, for example, if a parent knows how to play a particular musical instrument or knows how to ride a bike, this does not guarantee that his offspring will also know how to do this thing, because it is an acquired trait and it does not cause any change in the DNA. So, a limitation of Lamarck's theory of evolution is that the changes that result in individuals of the same species are transmitted to offspring. Question 59 says, vestigial structure in humans is dash. When we talk of vestigial structure, we are referring to the structures in the body that have no specific function, but they are present in our body. This is due to the residual part from ancestors. Some of the examples of vestigial structure, such as in birds, in flightless birds, their wing is a vestigial structure because they cannot fly with the wing, but they have it. Now, what about in humans? We have the wisdom tooth. It is the vestigial structure. We also have the tailbone. It is another example of vestigial structure. So our answer is option C. The tailbone is an example of vestigial structure in humans. Lastly, we move on to our question 60. Adenine pairs with thymine because in DNA pairing, cytosine pairs with guanine and adenine pairs with thymine. This is because the principle of base pairing states that a purine must always pair with a pyrimidine. So in this case, our adenine is the purine, while the thymine is the pyrimidine. On the other hand, guanine is the purine, while cytosine is the pyrimidine. These bonds are held together by hydrogen bond. So our answer is option D. One is a purine while the other is a pyrimidine. And as I just said, adenine is the purine while thymine is the pyrimidine. Thank you so much for joining us till the end of consideration of 2011 Waec Biology past question. I hope to see you in the next class. But before then, please follow us on our social media handles at instaschool_edu on Instagram and on Facebook, and at instaschool_live on Twitter. I'll see you next time.